Talking about people who certainly aren't angels, Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty.
Putting it lightly.
I know, obviously, complete monster, but at least we have some justice here. I was a little bit worried because me and Carl covered the setup of the trial, and there were lots of fishy things, how, they were keeping things hush-hush about the details, and how there weren't cameras in the courtroom.
They already planned a suicide day.
Yeah. And Bloomberg were writing pieces like, well, actually, Ghislaine Maxwell might be the real victim. And then it turns out that Michael Bloomberg is photographed with Ghislaine Maxwell. No, I can't see there being a hidden agenda behind that piece whatsoever. But never mind. Justice seems to have been served. And it's a good day. I'm going to have a toast to this.
I wish we had some champagne. But
yeah, well, we've got to wait until tomorrow. Yeah. Going to be at least drinking one drink to her going to prison for the rest of her life.
Damn. So what was she found guilty of?
Well, I'm just going to read from this BBC article, which actually lists all of the charges and the one which didn't stick for some reason. So it says the 60-year-old was found guilty on 5 of the 6 counts she faced, including the most serious charge, that of sex trafficking a minor. The verdict was reached after 5 full days of deliberation by a 12-person jury in New York. It means the British socialite could spend the rest of her life behind bars. A date for Maxwell's sentencing has not yet been set. So she's been found guilty, but they haven't actually figured out a sentence. However, the charge for trafficking alone carries a sentence of 40 years.
Minimum or maximum? Or?
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
I mean, I simply didn't have the time to look at the ins and outs of the specific
But either
laws,
way, she's there till she dies.
Yeah, with 5 different charges, yeah. And she's 60, which is why I mentioned that. There's no way she's getting out of prison unless some funny business goes on, basically. And it is possible.
I mean, we were joking earlier, if she spills the beans on every single person who's been to the island, Bill Clinton, then then we might be able to commute her sentence somewhat. But either way, she's going to be in there for a long time.
Absolutely, yeah. So the actual charges she was found guilty of, I've got them listed in 1 to 5. Sex trafficking of a minor, transporting a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, conspiracy to transport minors with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of minors, and conspiracy to entice minors to travel to engage in illicit sex acts. However, she was found not guilty on 1 count, enticing of a minor to travel to engage in illicit sex acts, which kind of surprising, but there's enough there that she is going to spend a long time in prison, which is, I guess,
I'm trying to find what the difference is between like the last one she was found guilty of and the one she wasn't.
I know, I couldn't really tell the difference either. And because I'm not a lawyer, I have not tried to explain it. I'm going to leave that. There are plenty of good people on YouTube that are lawyers and understand this stuff that are probably better off than me at doing it. But she has also been accused of lying under oath by hiding her participation in Epstein's crimes. However, nothing has come of this yet. But this may come into fruition in the coming months because this hasn't actually been tried because, of course, the verdict here has implicated her as guilty and therefore it's now provable that she lied under oath and therefore there's potential for more charges to be levelled against her for lying in previous trials. So that's something, I suppose.
I mean, if it doesn't have the death penalty, it doesn't change much, but...
I know. I mean, if there's a case where someone probably deserves it, well, definitely deserves it. I don't know why I said probably. So one thing that I did think was interesting is Maxwell's reaction was supposedly unusual, I would say. There were no cameras there, so I'm only going by hearsay. But apparently Maxwell showed no visible sign of emotion as the verdict was read out on Wednesday, only pouring herself a glass of water, which she sipped from twice. So she was completely indifferent, and I don't know...
I mean, probably unsurprised by the results.
Well, I imagine she knew that she was guilty.
Yeah.
That might be a part of it.
You know, if you've done the murder, you know you're going to be found guilty of the murder.
I mean, there's also the fact that at the start of the trial, she's doing things like blowing kisses to her sister and was being all smiley and happy and friendly. And
that's even creepier when you know you're guilty.
Yeah, and there were some weird puff pieces by journalists just like, I think it was... the New York Times or something like that. I don't want to say the specific one off the top of my head, but they're basically saying, oh, she was oddly charming, actually. It's like, that's such a weird thing to say.
A BLM are outside like justice for Ghislaine.
It's really bizarre. But yeah, it seems like she may have other plans, maybe. I mean, we shall see later that there are things in the works that may undermine justice from being done. Or maybe she's just accepted her fate. I mean, I can't kind of armchair psychologize despite my background, because I haven't been able to see any of the footage or anything. So, but I suppose that we can move on to the victims' reactions. So Annie Farmer, which I presume to be a pseudonym, who was one of the women who testified against Maxwell, said, "I am so relieved and grateful that the jury recognised her pattern of predatory behaviour. I hope this verdict brings solace to all of those who need it and demonstrates that no one is above the law." Which, fair enough. Glad that she's pleased with the outcome. And also Virginia Guthrie, who did not testify, rather controversially in this trial, said, "My soul yearned for justice for years, and today the jury gave me just that. I'll remember this day always. Having lived with the horrors of Maxwell's abuse, my heart goes out to the many other girls and young women who suffered at her hands and whose lives she destroyed. I hope that today is not just the end, but rather another step in justice being served. Maxwell did not act alone. Others must be held accountable. I have faith that they will be." Although I'm not as optimistic, I certainly want to see other people held accountable.
You'd love to see it. I'm even up for putting the corpse of Jeffrey Epstein up on a trial square. Why not? I mean, if we find the corpse guilty, it'll just be fun to at least get a guilty verdict there in stone.
I have a feeling he won't be able to defend himself very well. But
I don't care.
It's just a show trial.
Yeah, why not?
What do you say in your defence?
Sorry, who's going to suffer? The corpse?
He's just been pleading the fifth this whole time. Rather unfortunately, Maxwell's family have launched an appeal for some reason after the verdict. So if you move on to this article by GB News, it says, shortly after the verdict, her legal team said they're already working on an appeal. We firmly believe in Ghislaine's innocence, her lawyer, Bobby Sternheim, told reporters. In a statement posted on Twitter early, I think this morning, Maxwell's family said that they were very disappointed with the verdict and already begun the appeal process. So it seems like her family is still backing her and trying to get her out of it. They haven't thrown her under the bus, it seems.
You would have thought you'd disown her from the family?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a pretty good criteria, all the things she did, to disown someone from your family, no matter who they are. You're like, well, no, I don't want anything to do with you. You're a monster.
Child trafficker.
And the statement said on Twitter, "We firmly believe our sister's innocence. We are very disappointed with the verdict. We have already started the appeal tonight, and we believe that she will ultimately be vindicated." Under what grounds?
Do they mention anything?
No, they don't. They don't give away any potential evidence.
They just don't think it should be a crime, or what?
I don't know entirely, but it seems like something's in the works to try and get her out. But I don't know whether it's going to come to anything.
They made a deal with the devil. Hillary Clinton's going to bust her out or something.
If the devil is on Earth, it must be Hillary Clinton, though. You make a good point. But something interesting as well is that Ghislaine Maxwell's little black book is to remain a secret. This isn't necessarily recent, but it's worth going over because the judge has warned against needless name dropping, which is kind of bizarre to me.
But it's on the internet.
I know.
This is what I don't get about we're going to hide it from the court document. You can find the full names, phone numbers, and email addresses of everyone in the book.
I think there's
the
a somewhat redacted version. There's not the full version.
Oh no, I've seen the full version.
Have you?
Where you literally so people mention Andrew Neil's name was in the contacts book, for example. You can see his email.
I would be careful.
Address,
he literally sues anyone for.
I'm not saying you should go and find it or contact him or anything of the sort. But I'm saying it's strange to me that a court would censor that when they know you can get it on the internet with minimal work. It's just that aspect of it is strange. I
have actually got a link to Epstein's Black Book, which I was able to find, which is it's got the names of people, but it's got the phone numbers. But I think fair enough. You only really need to know the names. You don't want to be calling people up. But yeah, it's a very useful thing to go through. And if you go on our website in the reading list, you should be able to find it.
But this is the strangeness. It's like if the court wanted to release a redacted version, well then that would be perfectly suitable. And the fact that they don't want to, even though it's out there, I find strange. I do implore people to go through. There's too much there to go through today. But there are lots of familiar names there that
it's just interesting. That's all. And
To be said, on the caveat of this though, is that it's a contacts book, so it's not.
obviously, being in the book doesn't imply guilt, but
It means that she knew them,
Yes.
not that they went on the planes or even took part in any of the stuff.
and I mean, in the high society sort of thing, people kind of rub shoulders with everyone, which is kind of what Trump said, wasn't it?
She was his secretary, so that's the contact book for when you want to contact so and so. I've got the number.
But yeah, the little black book, which can Maxwell's one, which contains, I believe, more names than Epstein's, supposedly, names and addresses of nearly 2,000 world leaders, celebrities, and victims. That the court wants to keep this secret. Apparently, it's a full 97 pages long as well, which is a bit crazy, really, that they had that many people. But
Billionaire paedophile knows a lot of people.
oh, apparently so. Apparently, there are names in there like former President Clinton as well. So, but I'm going to skip over this. If you can find it online, there's no point me describing what's in there because you can look it up yourself, and I suggest you do so.
I'm going to move your mic a little bit. I can hear you rubbing up against the... Sorry.
Sorry. Right. So there's also, The Guardian has actually made a good point, which I know it's an unusual thing, but apparently they're turning over a leaf for the new year, maybe. I don't know.
I think nonsense is bad now?
No way. But no, they point out that Prince Andrew has emerged with barely a mention in the Maxwell trial. And this is kind of unusual considering he's one of the high-profile people that are implicated in these crimes, isn't he? So I'm going to read from this article, and it says, for the Duke of York, the fact that he was barely mentioned in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial will be an undoubted relief, with Maxwell declining the stand, no opening of her little black book of society contacts, and crucially, no sign of his accuser, Virginia Roberts Guthrie. Prince Andrew was merely a footnote in the New York's proceedings. Maxwell opted not to give evidence before being found guilty on 5 of 6 charges, saying there was no need because prosecutors had failed to prove their case, so the subject of Andrew was not raised with her via cross-examination. Of her book of contacts, said to be, this is going over the same stuff again, there's also the fact, and they mention this here, that the appearance of Guthrie, who is one of the main accusers of Andrew, she wasn't present in the trial, which is interesting in and of itself. And obviously, if she testified in the Maxwell trial, that would bring more attention to Prince Andrew's case, which is very interesting. But I believe she came to some sort of financial settlement, didn't she, in the end? So it might be that she's kind of somewhat done and dusted with Andrew, and is perhaps moving on to other people. I don't know necessarily. But I think she's still suing Andrew, claiming that he had sex with her on 3 other occasions 2 decades ago when she was 17. But it's kind of a bit murky. Like you hear of her doing this deal for financial settlements out of court, but then there are also reports of there being a lawsuit as well. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on here, but never mind. Moving on. If you want to know more about the background, Carl did a good article about Epstein's crimes and his relation to Maxwell, and this gives all of the background information. You can find that again in the reading list on the website, and it's definitely worth a read. I know that me and Carl went over this when we were talking about the setup for the trial as well. But moving on, final few things. The BBC carried out probably one of the worst blunders they could have. They they interviewed a lawyer about the Maxwell case who is implicated in the same crimes.
This is Mr. Dershowitz.
Which is literally the worst thing that they could have done. And
how do you feel about this alleged nonce? What?
And the BBC's record on dealing with paedophiles isn't exactly rosy, is it?
No,
so it's not exactly a good look for the BBC. So this Times article says, the BBC was criticised last night after interviewing a lawyer for his reaction to the Ghislaine Maxwell verdict, despite him being implicated in the case. Alan Dershowitz, who was previously Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, has been accused of sexual abuse by Virginia Guthrie, the same woman who alleged similar charges against Prince Andrew. Both men denied the charges. And the BBC issued an apology, where it says, last night's interview with Alan Dershowitz after the Ghislaine Maxwell verdict did not meet the BBC's editorial standards, as Mr. Dershowitz was not a suitable person to interview as an impartial analyst, and we did not make the relevant background clear to our audience who will look into how this has happened. I mean, that's pretty basic. He was Epstein's lawyer.
Then what do you mean you got to look into how this happened? You know how it happened. You decided to do it. Like, what are you hoping
ridiculous.
to discover?
I mean, you could just Google his name, and one of the main things that comes up is that he was Epstein's lawyer.
But whoever your reporter was that was down there knows. Surely they're following the case.
Clearly,
So,
clearly, even in the most basic of things, the BBC fails immediately. But I just wanted to end on an annoying note. So this isn't necessarily as relevant, but just a reaction. So Occupy Democrats saw an opportunity to supposedly get some cheap political capital here and refer to her as close Trump friend Ghislaine Maxwell, found guilty on 5 of 6 counts, including conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of a minor. And yeah, you get the idea. But they're painting it as if Trump was a close friend of hers, even though he kind of knew her in passing.
Like,
and there's not really any record to say that, but that even after he's out of office, the Trump derangement syndrome seems to carry on.
But also there's that one incident in which Trump does actually talk about Epstein on camera, and it's when no one else was alleging he was a nonce. And he just says, look, some stuff's going to come out in a few years, and you don't want to be around him. Like, he's a bad, bad guy. Like, if you were a nonce and wanted to carry on with your nonce friend, you wouldn't publicly say stuff like that on TV, alleging he's a nonce, because, well, you'd cover it up, wouldn't you? Whereas Bill Clinton never did such a thing.
Yeah, if they were being honest, close Clinton friend would have been much more accurate.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this Contemplations, which Josh and Bo did together about the culture and politics of Russia. This is part 1, so in case they missed anything, do let them know for part 2. But if you'd like to find out what else is coming out on the site, you can always follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com. Thank you and goodbye.